For our scriptures this morning, we're hopping through the Gospels. First, from Matthew chapter 5. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under the bushel basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. And from Luke chapter 14, a couple of different spots. On one occasion, when Jesus was going to the house of a leader of the Pharisees to eat a meal on the Sabbath, they were watching him closely. When he noticed how the guests chose the places of honor, he told them a parable. When you are invited by someone to a wedding banquet, do not sit down at the place of honor, in case someone more distinguished than you has been invited by your host, and the host who invited both of you may come to you and say to you, give this person your place. And then in disgrace, you would start to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit down at the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may say to you, friend, move up higher. Then you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. For all who exalt themselves shall be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. He said also to the one who had invited him, when you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers and sisters or your relatives or rich neighbors, in case they may invite you in return and you would be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed because they cannot repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. Here ends this morning's reading.
This is one of those mornings where I almost can't stand that we're not just having a conversation and that I'm waxing eloquent. But I know I'll get in trouble, but anyway, I will say this. I just would like, if you say something back to me, I will repeat what you said, okay? Why is this passage in the Bible? This social etiquette? Well, we'll talk about that more maybe after I talk for a little while. There's some things in it that, well, let me tell you what I got to say, and then we'll visit about it a little bit. Jesus sums up the parable about who is to be welcomed at the table with this: for all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Have we found that to be true in life? Not always, right? Pretty straightforward. Yet you may have noticed when you read these parables that Jesus' stories are never as obvious as they at first appear. That's why I paired it today with a passage in the Gospel of Matthew where Jesus declares, you are the light of the world. Shine your light. Somebody in my neighborhood, I'm curious what they're about, but they've just engraved in the fence, let your light shine. And then they put under it, turn on the switch. Kind of took away from it, me a little bit though. So which is it? Let your life shine before others. Do we stand in the spotlight or hide at the end of the table? Do we live boldly in the abundance of spirit or strive modestly not to call attention to ourselves? If we're to understand Jesus's call to humility, we need to step out of time and place in this Western, postmodern, technological world of the 21st century and into the caste system of first century Palestine. The society of Jesus' day was ruled not by democracy and equality, but by theocracy's hierarchy. Now remember, this isn't just autocracy, it's theocracy with the God-centered, right? And contained within it a belief in honor and shame. Jesus' story of a wedding guest who assumes an honored seat at the table and then must be asked to move down on down the line, that might be one of the last times you show up, right? That's a little shaming. Isn't the story of someone being humbled, isn't the story of someone being humble, but of someone being humbled or shamed? In his commentary on this passage, theologian Emerson Powery wrote, "In an honor and shame culture, avoiding shame is of the utmost importance. This isn't simply embarrassment. Public shame may have tangible implications for the shamed. A family's bartering practices or marriage proposals can be negatively affected by a public shaming if the shame is significant enough. In this first century society, a host is acting with honor when he invites guests to his table who are equally honorable. Friends, family, rich neighbors. Then these worthy people will reciprocate and invite the host to be their guest." Sounds a lot like our world, doesn't it? A public acknowledgement of one's honor brings the much desired societally accepted rewards. The invitation and the sharing of meals were seen as an important occasion to live out one's honor with fidelity to honorable customs. So that's the part I want you to catch hold of. We share some honorable customs in this society, and we are to live out those honorable customs. Think about that line. My husband and I grew up with mothers who felt that dinner table customs and manners were important. Anybody else fall into that thing? We sat down at the table together and began eating when the hostess was seated. Our mothers had both grown up in old German families where ironed linens at the table, including, we had one of those big rollers where grandma ironed all her tablecloths and napkins and folded them and ironed them again. Ironed linens, salad plates and forks, good china dishes were the custom. Both of us, Steve and I, most of the young people in the late 60s fought back against this very self-righteously and against other structures of behavior. As teenagers, it felt restrictive, and we resented being controlled by these mealtime rituals. It felt like mom was finally getting her place in the sun, and was going to milk it for all it was worth or something. But looking back, I'm appreciative of the care taken, of the slower and quieter pace, the passing of food, the care taken preparing the food and setting the table, and the manners required of us when we came to the table. Things were much looser when Steve and I raised our children, but we still always sat together around the dinner table. Meals began with grace. Mayonnaise jar was not allowed. That was a tribute to my mother. Shared customs that bring dignity to everyone. Don't you think they have a place in life? I want you guys to tell me. I got a pretty favorable crowd here because we're a little further along in age, right? I won't get quite the pushback. Shared customs that bring dignity to everyone have a place in this life. But the catch is the phrase, bring dignity to everyone. Who is everyone? And is everyone welcome at the table? My generation worked hard to not shame, to there not be a shaming quality to things. We didn't like to use the phrase, you should be ashamed of yourself. In fact, that's probably considering bad parenting now. You should be ashamed of yourself. So think about that one. Okay, I'm gonna go at it. Anybody got a thought? I'm gonna start by saying it's not our job to shame, but I do think there's a little bit of a purpose in a person feeling their own shame, their own, what's another word for it? Disappointment in themselves, or sense that they didn't live up to some a little bit higher image of who it is. The fairness, fairness to the host who prepared the meal, the fairness to other people at the table. I remember when my kids would come home from being with another family and And they'd say, Mom, in their family, they call it, let's get food. Not, it's dinner time, or let's eat out, or let's eat, but let's get some food. And there is a little bit of that sense today. When Jesus arrived on that scene, okay, he fought against the customs of exclusion, but I don't think necessarily of dignity and kindness. In Luke's gospel, over and over again, we hear of Jesus's odd choice of table companions. See, that in itself was not okay. Among them are tax collectors and prostitutes, the poor, the crippled, the blind, the lame, and women of all kinds, for goodness sakes, even the despised Samaritan woman. But Jesus is also often invited to meals in the homes of the Pharisees. That was a little different business. They're all too eager to host this puzzling man at their supper table. They want to see what this guy is all about, why more and more people are drawn to his words and actions. These Pharisees, respected widely for their wisdom and knowledge of religious law, something higher to aspire to, right? Well, they're not so clean in some ways, their intentions. They watch him closely, not for the sake of learning what he has to teach. No humility brought to the situation, not even of simple idle curiosity, but in a determined attempt to catch him in unacceptable behavior, and he was all too ready to let them see it. And Jesus seldom disappointed them. In this passage, before the meal even begins, he breaks the law by healing on the Sabbath. Then he tells the strange story about where they should choose to sit. Doesn't he realize that a man of honor should choose a place of honor? Is it any surprise that these respectable leaders wonder if Jesus is making a mockery of all that is noble in their society? We can take a different form and hear ourselves or hear our elders speaking that way. He's the one doing shameful things. The sharing of meals, strangely, and this is why I said, why is it even in there? But somehow the sharing of meals has been a significant aspect of Bible stories. It's a significant aspect of sharing warm community in most cultures around the world. And in Luke's gospel, Jesus' stories are often quite center around these times of familiarity and tenderness. Jesus both attends and speaks about banquets and guest lists. He performs miracles, turning a few fish and loaves of bread into food for thousands. He prepares breakfast on the shore for his disciples and calls them in from fishing. He speaks of the kingdom of heaven, using such images of food as the yeast a woman uses to bake bread and to make it rise. Or uses examples of powerful forgiveness, like that of the father of the prodigal son, who orders the killing of the fatted calf that they might eat and celebrate his son's return. Unlike John the Baptist, remember the ascetic John, who shuns the pleasures of the flesh? Jesus drinks wine and shares it with his friends. Heck, he even turns water into wine so they have enough for the party, right? Even in his farewell supper with them in the upper room, he shares food. This emphasis on food, the very basis of life on this earth, is curiously connected to the word humility. Humility comes from the Latin word, oh my gosh, how often have I said this? Humus, which is a word for the earth, the soil. When one is humble, he or she is aware of his connection to the earth. What does that mean exactly? Think about that for a minute. It means, to me, to be grounded by the earth. It doesn't just mean I know the names of flowers and I plant a garden, although that's part of it, because that's what you want to be doing. It means that you recognize that we are made of the earth, that we come from the earth, no matter how highfalutin we think we are. Humility is not self-deprecation, but rather deep and honest self-awareness. Grounded in humility, we know that our own true nature is not something that should ever bring shame. Now that's where I'm going here. Not who we are should ever bring shame I'm a woman, I'm old. What are we? What are we that some people feel shame? I have a learning disability. Help me, help me, help me. I'll say it out loud if you say it. I'm black or brown. Handicapped. Oh, you guys have no inferiorities, do you? That's great. Come right up to the head of the table. Just kidding you. It is God-given. Our humility is God-given. It's of the earth, even as it is full of the Spirit. The truly humble human knows that he or she is created in the image of God and that all other human beings have a divine nature as well. The life and teachings of Jesus through the lens of mealtime invite us to accept our sensual human nature as right and good, earthly and earthy, yet spiritual in origin and purpose. It calls us to trust and to celebrate it in ourselves and in others, and it pointedly calls us to inclusive community. We indeed shine our light into the world around, but we also invite and support others to shine their light, their God-given light into the world. And if we're not doing that, we're not shining. The table is round, and there is no end, and all are welcome. We are to sit with the lost and suffering ones because we know we are all lost and suffering. So we offer those who have been most ignored or shunned by the world, poor folks, refugees, immigrants, those struggling with addictions, grieving widows, those who've been abused because of their race or religion or sexual preference or disability. We offer a place at the table. Jesus offered deep hospitality. Deep hospitality expects nothing in return. It's never tit for tat. Remember the word I shared with you a while back, philoxenia. Philoxenia. It's a Greek word used to express deep hospitality. Philos, of course, means love. Philosophy, love of wisdom. Philos means love, and xenos means stranger. So philoxenia means love of stranger. Deep hospitality is love and welcome for the stranger, the ones we don't know, the ones we don't easily understand. Aren't we all guilty of that in some ways, in a, not a terrible way, but we do want to be with people more like us. Even our own age, maybe our own gender or whatever, we want to be with people. It's easier. We get them, socioeconomically, we get them better, We don't have to apologize for who we are or what we got, or, we do look for like people. So this deep hospitality, this love of stranger, if it's not, oh, aren't I wonderful, how much I love the stranger, where it goes, humility goes right out the window. But that sense of that stranger may be worth knowing. That stranger is worth knowing to someone. I've spoken of this strange word before, but philoxenia, love of stranger, takes deep generosity of spirit to another level. It is a spirit imparted to each of us by our Creator. In other words, we don't do it. A hospitality comes from a source outside of ourselves. I witnessed philoxenia here at First United. Now, yeah, we're a pretty white, pretty homogenous group in a lot of ways. But when strangers come to our door or immediately welcomed, they are immediately welcomed as friends. We're honored by their presence among us, and we offer an extravagant welcome. And I'm proud. I'm humbly proud. I'm proud of the open hearts and minds throughout this congregation, because pride isn't the opposite of humility. Real pride can be at the heart of humility. I've experienced a humble pride here among you over the years, watching your acts of profound kindness and acceptance, not only of each other, but of those strangers who come to our door looking for a church built on love of humanity, love of God, love of community, or just looking for a handout. We are called to sit with God's people at the table, expecting nothing. But strangely, when this happens, we find we receive gifts of deep blessing, new perspectives, new understandings, a real community of shared experience. Humbly and in the presence of the humility of another, we can sense God's presence between us and within us. All of us belong at the end of the table, and it is only at the invitation of our divine host that we recognize that God's table has no end, that it is always round, and that all places are places of honor, and that when we shine our true light, it will always shine into the face of another. Amen.